Right, today we are looking at browse views. First of all, what's a browse view? A browse view is a set of pre-prepared search results, and they're prepared that way for speed, because it's one of these big entry points and navigation points of the repository. So when you browse, you can see this is browsing by year. These are all the year values we have for our publications in our repository. This is the ePrint standard test data. And when you look at a list of things, you have you have different ways of grouping them. So you can have jump points for by well, here we've got creators, item type, again with jump points, so you can jump down to the conference items, and you can have just a plain list. And wherever you have one of these lists of items, if you change .html to .include, you get this unbranded version that can be included in other repositories. Note that this is coming out as UTF data, but my browser probably thinks it's not. I don't really know how to drive this browser, so I don't know how to change that. Never mind, it's not important. When you're browsing by when you're browsing, you have a lot of possible values. You can break them down into columns, or even break them down into pages of results for these menu views. But what we're going to be looking at today is how to configure browse views. This may well be quite a long video because there's actually a lot of stuff that can be covered here. So we'll first need to log in. So what we'll do is we'll start off by looking from the front end at the configuration, and we'll move to the command line in a bit. So what we have is this file called views.pl, and this defines the views that we have. So for the year view, which was one of the ones we had, we have an ID which defines where, if we browse by year, you can see this year ID appears here, which is the same one as here. We have a number of fields that can be defined, a number of menus that can be defined. A menu can have a number of fields, and a menu is this page. You have a menu of items to select from. And if we have a look, is there one with multiple menus? So if we look at divisions, we can see the divisions view has two menus. It has one on the field divisions, and it has one on the field year. So this is kind of a multiple menu one. So if we browse by division, we can see there's only actually one item type with division, but if we click on it, we can see that now we have another menu which shows us all of the items in here, all of the years of all of the items in here. This is a particularly poor example because there's only one item tagged in the repository. Here we have the creators field. Now, if you think about the fields we're using, you could turn this into a people field by having this first menu based on the creator's name or the editor's name, and you can have both of them appearing. So this is why you might want multiple fields in a single menu. And we saw that the creators is broken down on the menu. It's, I believe, the only one here that is on the menu by kind of ranges of values, and that's all sorted out automatically by a kind of a range function and a group function, and these are kind of the standard ones to use. Right, so that defines the menus. We have an ID, we have menus, we have an order that they're displayed in, and then we have this variations. Variations defines when you're looking at the list of items, what are the variations, what are the different ways. So if we through here, we've got by item type with the jump points and no grouping, which is the default magic word. We also have this thing, hideempty. So this is particularly useful on things that on things like name sets and subject trees. So if we look at, for example, browsing by divisions, we have this browse by divisions. We only have one of them show up because hideempty in divisions is not defined. Yeah, it must default to false. Let's edit this and change that, and you'll see what that does. Divisions. So we want hideempty 0. Now when we change this, nothing will actually happen because browse views are generated on a kind of on a nightly basis. They time out after a certain amount of time. But let's have a look. There should be a button to regenerate the views. So now, if we refresh this, hopefully, maybe it's allow null. I get confused between those two. I don't know what that does then. Divisions. Divisions. Ah, wait, it's on here. Hideempty 0. Sorry, it's on a field. Yes. Let's actually undo that change I made to it down here. We don't want that hideempty. Oops. I've got into a bit of a mess. Let's just go back here. Divisions, this hideempty we don't need. So set hideempty to 0 there. So now when we regenerate the views, why is that not? So clicking on the regenerate views button doesn't actually regenerate the views, but the next time they're requested, they will be regenerated. So now we have, there we go. So we have these, I regenerated the views without reloading the configuration, and that's something that you can often kind of bang your head up against. So now we are showing the empty branches even though there's nothing in them, whereas before we didn't produce links or items for them. And this can be quite important as well, because if you're you may want to show what things there are in your structure without even if they don't have any items associated with them. Right, so that's that. Let's take a look at, and I'm going to switch to the command line here because just because I just get frustrated with browser windows. I'd rather be using Vim. Right, so when you make changes, it's always a good idea to make them in new files. What have we got here? So what we'll do is we will create a new browse view, and this browse view is going to be based on a different metadata field. Let's have a look. What have we got? We're going to base it on item type, say. I believe we only have 2 item types in here. So as always, the best way to approach these problems is to create a new, is to copy something that already exists. But what we're not going to do, creating a browse view, it's not a good idea to change files. Modifying existing files will make upgrading more difficult. So what I'll do is I'll find that change I made to divisions. I'll change hideempty back to 1. And then all of the changes we can make in here. So if we want to change an existing browse view, because this structure already exists, because it's loaded before this one, because they're loaded alphabetically, what we can do is we can just say we can just push a new one. Push C browse views, and then we can create our new browse view. So let's copy an existing one. Yeah, I copied the brackets too. So what we're doing is we have this array defined over here, which is where the browse views are defined, and we're just pushing a new definition onto it. And if we do it this way, we don't need to modify an existing configuration file. So when we upgrade, we can see that it's not been changed and just swap in the new version of it, the new default version for that version of EPrints. So we'll call this item type, and the field name is the type field. We will allow null. So new column at defines how many items there need to be in this list for to create a new type. So let's run this on title, because that will show us a lot of lists, because a lot of items, because there are a lot of that will show us a lot of items because each title is unique. So what we need to do is reload the configuration. And refresh the views. Then we can switch back to our browse views. Now we have this kind of top level browse view page, which lists all of the ones that are defined. You can see this bottom one is this new one, and it doesn't have a phrase. So we'll need to associate a phrase with that. You can see here, this is all of the items listed by title. Now, there are 100 items. Are there 100 items? That looks something like 100. But the way the way the way the new column at works is that once you go on to 11 items, once there are more than 10 in the first column, it spills over to a second column and then spills over into a third column. So if we put a 0 at the front, that would mean it's always 2 columns. Well, 1 makes more sense because if there's only 1 item. If we reload the configuration and refresh the views, we will see we should go up to 4 columns now. There we go, 4 columns. And clicking through on a value brings us this list here. And there are things we can do to this list as well, change the variations. But what I actually want to do as kind of an advanced piece of configuration is to change the way this renders. So what we're going to do is we're going to write 2 render functions, one for the view and one for the list and one for the menu. And to do this, we're going to need render items example. So we're going to, on the default view, we're going to call render equals demo renderer. And then we need to define our function. Should probably call it demo view list renderer, because then it works in a context by itself. And let's copy across the arguments. This first couple of lines is useful. So we have passed in the repository object a list of items, a view definition, the part of this page, and the file name of this page. And what we need to return is a DOM object. Oh, no. What we need to return is the contents of the file to write to, it looks like. Now, the item list is all of the... What is the item list? I've done this before a few times, but I can't remember. Yes, the item list is the list of items that we have. Right, so what I'm going to do is I believe that's a function. This is just a kind of an empty fragment. So we're going to need to build up a DOM object, and then we convert it into a string and pass it back. Although I think actually that changed. I think the example is wrong, and it now needs to be a DOM object passed back. Right. So for each frag this is me building up a DOM object. And we'll say which citation to use, which will be citation foo. Doesn't exist yet. I'm guessing at the function names from memory. It probably won't work. I'll have to look them up in a sec. And then what we'll do is we'll run generate views. What was the name of the view? It was item type. So now it says it's giving us a configuration error. I have to debug this. Local views line 32. Ah, 2 open brackets, 1 closed bracket. 31 now. Same again. Let's use epadmin test. That's the thing you should use. And then let's try generating the views, see what happens. Undefined function, demo list view renderer. Ah, missing underscore. Define demo list view renderer. Haha, demo view list renderer. We've got undefined citations. So we've defined this citation foo, but let's have a look at how this looks now. No grouping, it was on the default view. So here we have our text in here. Now this can all be done with a citation. This is if you want to do kind of interesting things with your browse views. So let me give you an example of when you might want to use this, because you can also do functions for rendering the list. So if we browse on here, what I created for this was quite a kind of heavyweight, and the screen width isn't probably very suitable for this, but quite a heavyweight browse view based on these things. So this is the view, and this is the list of items. So each of these is an ePrint, and it renders in a particular way. And this is done actually with citation styles and rendering things inside things, because this is a related item. And this is a related item to this item, so you can kind of dig down and bring kind of documents through and display them. And so you have a kind of a programmatic handle on the object, so you can build this up any way you can, any way you would like to. And then we'll link through. Oops, that's not the link. That's the pop open, pop close link. We link through to, and this is the rendering of the item. But you can really do some kind of complicated things if you want special browse views. But most of the time, and if I come back here, I can replicate this by, I believe, just putting a citation style in here, citation foo, and then if I just create a citation, I could do exactly the same thing with a citation. Let's use because I think result. There you go, item.citation, that's what I want. So that will be the default citation, and then wait. Need to use an entity, of course. And then we just regenerate the views. We've got this undefined phrase again. But what it means is, so we have this is created by our render function, but if we look at item type, we have this. If we see here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 dashes, and here we have this 2-1. So this one comes from the citation, and this bit of text comes from the renderer. Let's talk a little bit now about if you're having performance issues and need to spread the generation of your browse views across several days. So the way browse views are generated is that there's a timeout, and when a browse view is requested, if that timeout has been exceeded, then it will regenerate it. Now that's good if the load is spread, but what can happen if you have a large repository and it gets crawled by a spider, it can trigger a lot of pages generating in a very short amount of time. So if you have a very large set of browse views, this can cause problems. So you can increase the timeout on those. And there's also a max items parameter. If you have more than a certain number of items in a browse view, it may cause you it may cause performance issues. But I think this 3000 was set about 7 or 8 years ago, so it could probably get away with being much higher than that now, as computer performance has increased. So let's look at the ePrints wiki to see if we can find information about browse views. Adding new views. Whose page is this? Me, Patrick. This was me years ago. That's my old username. Tim Mosboard. Lots of good people been contributing to this. And we have this list of all options. We did this one. Lackey, I don't recognize that username. But this is a kind of an overview of it. Here we go, max list age. So if we have a search through this document for _age, well, max list age, max menu age. It defaults to 1 day, it's a time in seconds. So what I believe we can just do is say And what we'll do again, we'll do this in a separate file so that we can modify it in place. We'd actually better make this as Z because we want this to run after anything else. If we define any new ones, we want it to apply to that too. So and what should we say? Well, let's make this a week. So that's a minute, that's an hour, that is a day, and that is a week. Don't look at the keyboard. Where would I be? I'm using a different keyboard because the batteries in my wireless keyboard ran out. And now I don't know where the hash key is. Let's find somewhere to copy and paste from. I can copy it from another file. Then so what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through and set this on all items. So all we're going to do is iterate through the structure after we've defined it, and that way we don't modify the existing default file, but we can still change the behavior of a repository. And again, this is really useful for when you upgrade, because if the file hasn't been changed, you can just move in the new default file. Wait, it's max. What was the two property names? I've used the wrong thing here. Browse views max age. We'll set it to the same to both, and it was max menu age, max list age. Max list age. So we can test that by running epadmin test first off. Line 6. What have I done wrong? Didn't close the brackets. All right, so we can test this in our render function, because I believe the view definition is passed through. So we can check that's been set. It was max, was it? Max list age. So then when I run generate views, that's right, running all of them, not just the single view. It's just the item type view. So you can see if I stop it, this is coming out here. This is what this property is set to. So we can see that that has been successfully set on our browse view. So we haven't set it here in this code. What we've done is we've modified it in a separate file. And again, this is a very important technique to use. We've increased the timeout, and that's great. If we want to now generate it nightly, that's good. But what happens if it takes more time than we're comfortable with to generate nightly? So we'll typically have something like in our cron tab, we'll typically have something like all months, 0 hour, all days, all months. Sorry, at 25 minutes past midnight. Let's say 3 o'clock. That's pretty quiet time of day. On all days of the month, on all months of the year, and on all days of the week, and we will be running generate views, and then the ID of the repository, which is a birdhouse. So that would run nightly. Contab -L, and it's always a good idea to give this a check. Copy and paste. I think I know what it is. It's ePrints 3, isn't it? Yeah. So that's running. Don't worry about running it. Let's break out and So what you can do, day of the week. So I believe we can say and we can now add a -view. We can say this is the view of, this is when the divisions view gets regenerated. This is when the subjects view gets regenerated. This is when the year view gets regenerated. This is when the item type view gets regenerated. And by doing this, you can spread the load across the whole week. And if you have a really big repository, or perhaps your server isn't handling the load of doing this very well, this can be a good way to spread the load across separate nights. I mean, it does mean your browse views can be up to a week out of date, but if you've got important events, you can kind of trigger these to be done, and you can reduce this time and have them regenerated. Because really, what this gets in the way of is things like if the browse view process is using up a lot of processor, it will get in the way of things like searching, and it will just lead to some general slowness across the repository, perhaps, as the database load goes high, because generating these views is quite database intensive. It's quite performance hungry. Right, so I think that's all I have to say about browse views, and I hope you found it useful.